let's continue working with our ratings functionality. The next thing that I want to do is that as I hover over these stars, I want that the current star and the previous stars get a different color. So let's do that. Let me come here to Visual Studio Code. Let's go to the ratings component. And what we're going to do is that here in this font awesome icon, I will say on mouse over, and I want to pass an expression handle mouse over, and I need the index +1 because you know that the index is 0 base. So I need the number of the position of the star. So let me come here and let me say function handle mouse over rate number, and I want to say set selected value rate. So I need a set selected value because I want to change this selected value that we have as a property. So let me say here const selected value set selected value equal to use state props selected value semicolon here, and then this is working. And now I want to come here to class name because I want to add some logic. I want to add a logic here that will say selected value greater than or equal to index +1. I will use the ternary operator and I will say checked, otherwise null. What are we doing here? Well, we are saying the following. If the selected value is greater than this index +1 that we have here, it means that this star should be marked as checked. And this checked is a class that we're going to create right now. Let me come here and let me right click on utils, new file, ratings.css, enter. Let me say checked color orange, semicolon here, save. Let me minimize here. Let's go back to ratings, and in here I want to import that CSS file. So ratings CSS, semicolon here, save. And now let's go back to here. And if we hover over here, you are going to see that now not only the current star that I am hovering is getting color differently, also the stars that comes before that star is also marked. So as you can see, I can do this and there is no problem with that. And as you can see, this is working. Now this is great and beautiful, but we have not finished. Let's come back here, and what I want to do next is to handle an onClick, because with the onClick is that the user is going to vote for a movie. So let me say handle click, and I will say index +1. Let me say here function handle click rate number, and then we're going to do something here. I only want users that are authenticated being able to vote. So what I will do is that I will use our claims here from our use context. I will get the claims from our authentication context, because that way I can say const user is logged in equal to claims length greater than 0. Then if user is not logged in, let me negate that, then return, and we're going to use swal. Let me import with alert fire, and here we're going to say title error text you need to log in, and then icon error semicolon here. Now that is great. After that, we're going to say set selected value to rate, and then props on change rate semicolon here. Alright, so with this component should be done. Now I need to actually do something with the onSubmit here in the movie details. So let me come up here and let me say function handle rate number, And in here I will say handle rate. Let me paste that here, handle rate, and let's come up. And what I want to do is to use Axios to say Axios post, and I want to pass URL ratings, which I need to put in the endpoints file. So let me clone this and let me say URL ratings and ratings here, save. And now let's come back here and let me import that, and let me pass an object here which is going to have rating as rate and movie ID as the ID of the movie. Then I will say here swal, and let me try to import swal fire, and I will say icon success and title rating received, semicolon here. That should be enough here. We should be kind of good to go. Now let me save, and now let me come back to Google Chrome, and we're going to refresh just in case, and we're logging. Actually, let me log out to see that if I try to vote, we're going to get an error. Let me put this E with a capital E. So let me go back to here. Let me say here error, save, and that should be better. So okay, let me log in. Let me say my credentials here. Let me put my credentials here. Let me copy my password and paste it here, send. Now let me go back to here, and I will try to vote, but although I click on it, nothing is happening. And if I press F12, we're going to see that we got a 401. 401? What does that mean? We will see that next. In the previous video, we saw that we tried to vote for a movie, but we got a 401 from our web API. Why? Well, first, let's respond the question, what is a 401? 401 means unauthorized. It means that we're trying to use a resource at the level of our web API that we're not allowed to use. If you remember from a previous video here, let's go to the ratings controller, and in here we have this authorized attribute, which means that this endpoint that we're trying to use is protected and will only be accessible by those users that are authenticated. Okay, that is fine. And if we try to use this endpoint when we are not authenticated, we are going to get a 401 unauthorized, which is exactly what we have here. That makes sense, but how come we're not authenticated? I can see my name here, right? Well, I am authenticated in React, but I am not authenticated in the web API in the sense that I am not sending the JWT, the JSON Web Token, back into my web API when I issue this HTTP request when I click this rating component. So what we have to do is to intercept that HTTP request and insert the token in there so that that token gets to go to the web API, and then we will be authenticated at the web API level also. So let's do that. Let me come to Visual Studio Code, and what we are going to do is that we are going to create a function that will allow me to intercept every single one of the HTTP requests that we do from Axios. So let me open this. Let's minimize this so that we have more space. I need to go to here to utils, right click here, new files, and I will say HTTP interceptors.ts, enter. This will be a function. I will have here a function. Let me say then export function configure interceptor, and then I will say here Axios, and I want to import Axios. Let me import Axios interceptors request use, and then in here I have to pass a function config, and then in here I want to retrieve that token, but in order to do that, I have to go to handle JWT and create a function that will return the token because we don't have that. So let me say here export function get token, and I will just say return local storage get item token key. Now with this I'm getting the token. Now let's come here and I will say const token equal to get token, and let me import that. So import get token from, and let me go to auth JWT, handle JWT, and in here I will say if there is a token, then I want to say config headers authorization. There is a header called authorization, which is where we have to put the token, and we need to use better and then token. Let me put semicolon here. This is because JSON Web Tokens is a better authentication scheme in which I am saying that the person that has the token, the bearer of the token, should be authenticated as long as the token is valid, of course. So let me come here and let me return config semicolon here, and then after this comma I can say function error. What happens if there is an error? Then I can say return promise reject, and I can just pass the error along. And that's it. Now I have to use this configure interceptor, and I can make this default. Now I can use this configure interceptor in the app component. Let's come up and let's see that here I have configure validations. Right below that I can use configure interceptor, and I can try to import that. So let me say import this from, and I can say URLs HTTP interceptors, and that's it. We are good to go. Let me save. Let's come back here. Let me refresh, and let's see that now we have this like this. And if you have this error, by the way, about embed player, that is because you have an ad blocker, and that ad blocker is interfering with this iframe that we have here. So it is normal. Don't worry about it. Now let me say that I want to vote a 4 out of 5. Rating received. Okay, great. It means that indeed we have voted for our movie. Let me go to SQL Server Management Studio and let's go to the ratings table. Let me refresh. Here we have the ratings table. Select top 1000, and here as you can see we have rate 4, movie ID 2, and my user ID. Excellent. Now let me do something. Let me refresh, and as you can see we don't have the vote here. Let's do that. Let me go to the individual movie component and let's see what we need to do. Actually, we wanted to go to the movie details component, and then what I'm going to do is that here, see that here I need to pass the selected value, so I need to get that from the movie. So let's come here to movie DTO F12, and in here I want to put the user vote. So let me say user vote number and also average vote, which is also a number. And now let me pass that average vote and user vote to my component. So let me come here to movie details and let's come down here, and in here in ratings I can pass movie user vote, and after that I can put average vote equal to, and here I can say movie average vote, and let me put this as a column here. Now let me save. Let's come back here and let me refresh, and as you can see by default we have a 4 mark here because this is my vote and this is the average vote of the movie. Of course we have a simple 4 because we only have one vote, which is 4, but as we get more votes, this number will change. In this video, we are going to configure some of the endpoints of our Web API so that only admin users can use them. The idea is the following. If you remember, a JSON Web Token contains a list of claims about the user, and a claim is simply information about the user. So what we're going to do is that we're going to use claim-based authorization so that only users with a certain claim will be able to use some of the endpoints of our application. That claim is going to be the role claim, and that claim must have the value admin, so that then the user will be able to use the protected endpoints of our application. So first, what we have to do is to come here to the startup class, and we are here in the configure services method, and what I want to do is to create a security policy. With that security policy, we are going to say that there is a requirement for some users to use some endpoints, and that requirement it is that they have the role claim with the admin value. So let me configure that right here. Let me say services add authorization options, and in here I can add that policy. So options add policy, and I can give it a name. I can name it is admin, comma here policy. Now let me configure the policy. The policy is going to say policy dot require claim, and then we're going to say that the name of the claim is going to be role, also called the type of the claim, and then the value must be admin, and that's it. With this and a semicolon here, with this we have configured the policy. Now we have to apply it. So we are going to go to the different controllers that we have made throughout our application to apply this policy. So I will ignore the accounts controller because these endpoints must be accessible by people that are not authorized. So let me go to actors, and here what I will do is that I will add authorize here at the level of the controller, which means that this authorization filter, this authorized filter, will apply to every single endpoint in this controller. Now I want to say authentication schemes equal to JWT better defaults dot authentication scheme policy equal to is admin, which is the policy that we just created. Now let me see if there is any exception that I have to make. If there is any endpoint that should be accessible by any user. Let me see. I think that none of these should be accessible by anonymous users, so this is great. Now let me go to genres, and in here let me paste that authorize attribute, and let me control dot here to bring the corresponding namespaces. And now let's see which one of them must be accessible by anonymous user. This is one, allow anonymous, because this is used in our filter page, but the other ones should be protected. Okay, so now let's go to movies controller, and as we can see here we have an authorized, but we need to add the policy. So policy equal to is admin. So let me save, and let's see if we are missing a allow anonymous. This is post get by ID. This is for the movie details. The filter has allow anonymous. Then we have post, put get, put, and delete. Okay, we're fine. So movie theaters controller, this is also another one that needs the authorized attribute. So let me control dot here and control dot here, and this is fine. I don't think there is a need for an allow anonymous in this controller. This is great. And finally we have rating controllers, which already have is authorized. We don't have to say policy is admin because this is an endpoint that should be accessible by users that are authenticated, but they don't have to be admin to be able to rate a movie. So great, we are done with that. Now I would like to test this, so let me go back to my React application, but as we can see I am not an admin, so I cannot test that. But we're going to cheat a little bit, and I will make myself an admin by hand, and don't worry, because later we will learn how to make a user an admin by code. But now let's just do it by hand. Let me come here. I need to go to a table called ACPNet user claims edit top 1000. I think it was 200, but okay. Now I want my user ID, I can get it from here. If you don't have it here, you can always go to the ASP.NET user table, select 1000 and get the ID from there. And then I want to come here and say user ID, then role, and then admin. Enter. And we're good to go. Now I need to go back to Google Chrome. I need to log out, then log in, because now I will get a claim with the role name and value admin. So let me get my password, let me paste it here, send, and now as you can see I get genres and edit and delete. Let me go to genres and let's see that I am able to come here. Let's create a genre, a new genre, enter, and as you can see I was able to create a new genre, and now I will say delete, delete, and as you can see I am indeed an admin. But as we just said, I cheated a little bit because I made myself admin by hand. Now let's learn how to do that by code. In this video, we are going to work on our web API so that we can make a user an admin through code. First, what we're going to do is that we're going to create an endpoint here in our accounts controller that will allow us to list all of the users of our application. So let me say http get, and I will say here list users, and then here I will say authorize control dot to bring this namespace, authentication schemes, JWT better defaults, and I will bring this namespace, and I will say here policy is admin. I am making this a protected endpoint, and this should be authentication scheme. I am making this a protected endpoint because only administrators should be able to see the list of users of the application. Now let me say here task action result list of user DTO, and I will create a DTO in just a moment. I will say list users, I'll say get list users, and I will say here from query, because I want to paginate, I'll use pagination DTO, and now let me create this DTO. Let's go here, right click on DTOs, add class, and then I will paste user DTO here, and I will only have two properties here, which are ID and also a string email. And now I can come back here and I can say var queryable equal to context, and now I need to get a hold of the application DB context, so I will say application DB context, and also I need a mapper because I will use automapper, control dot and bring this namespace mapper, and I will initialize this as a field, and also the context, control dot field, and this is done. Now I can come here and I can say var queryable equal to context users as queryable, and I will come here and I will say await http context, insert parameters, control dot to bring this namespace, and I want to pass the queryable, and then I will say var users equal to await queryable, and I will order by email, then I'll use paginate, and I will pass the pagination DTO, and I will say to list async control dot to bring this namespace, and that's it. Now I will say return mapper map, and I will map to a list of user DTO, and I will say users here. And now let me go to automapper profiles. So let's say automapper profiles, and let me come down here because I need to create a new rule, create map from identity user control dot to bring this namespace to user DTO, and that's it. Now I can come back here and this is done. Now this is only for getting the list of users. Now through that list of users we're going to get the user ID, and then we're going to invoke another endpoint for making a user an admin. So let's do that. I will say here http post, and the route is going to be make admin, and then I will say I will copy this from here and I will paste it here, and I will say public async task action result make admin, and I will just receive from body, I will receive the user ID. And now I can say var user await user manager find by ID async, and I will pass the user ID, and then I will say await user manager. I will use the user manager to assign the claim to the user, and I will say add claim async, and I will pass the user and the claim. I will say new claim, and I will say here role, and the value is going to be admin. And that's it. Now I can say return no content. And that's it. Now I can create another endpoint, but for removing an admin. I will say here remove admin, and I will say here remove admin, and I will say here remove claim async, and that's it. Now I can compile my application and we're good to go. In this video, we are going to create a component that will allow us to list the users of our application, and also it will allow us to make them or remove them from the admin role. So let's do that. Let me go to src, right click on auth, new file, index users.tsx, enter, and let me say export default function index users, and let me say return, and here I will use the index entity component, and let me import index entity. So import index entity from, let me go to utils index entity, and then here I want to say the following. First, I want to pass as a generic user DTO, and we need to create that DTO. So let's go to models auth.models, and let me say here export interface user DTO, ID a string, email a string, save. Let's come back here. Let me import that, import user DTO from, and let's go to models, semicolon here. Now let me say the following. Let me say title users, and also let me put URL and backtick here. This should be backtick URL accounts, and let me import that, import from endpoint, semicolon here, slash list users. Now something else that I am expected to send is, let me come here, is a create URL. But in the case of a user, I don't want to have a create URL. So what I will do is that I will make this property and entity name both to be optional, so that if I come here after this title, here we have this link that is about creating an entity. I want to say here props create URL. I want to use the ternary operator, so to indicate that the link will only be rendered if the create URL is present. So as you can see, now we don't have any errors here, and also this is making this part of the component optional. So let me save, and let's come back here. And now here in the children, remember that this is a function, so users fragment here, and I want to put here the head, the R, the age, and then name, and then the body, and in here we're going to have users map user tr, then key user ID td, and here we're going to have two buttons. One of them, button, is going to be about making an admin, so make admin, and then we're going to say here on click, and here I will have custom confirm, and I will import that, and I want to pass here make admin, which is a function that we are going to create, user ID. So let me create that make function. Let me come here and let me say here async function make admin ID a string, and in here we're going to do something, but we're going to do that in a moment. Let me first import the button from utils button semicolon here, and as you can see, this is working here. Now something else that I need to do is to the custom confirm. I want to pass a custom title, which is going to be, do you wish to make user email and admin? And then I want to say here, do it. Okay. So after that, I want to create another button. So let me copy this and put it here. And let me put this where it should be, around here. Now this button is going to be about remove admin. So remove. Do you wish to remove this person as an admin? And again, do it. Alright, so let me say here, remove admin. Then let's come here and let me say, remove admin here, remove. Let me save and let's see how we're doing. First, I need to come to the menu component because I need to add a new link here. So let me expand this authorize, which has this list of menu items, and let me clone one of them. And let me say here, users. And then here in 2, I will write users. Now let me save and let me go to route config because now I need to create a new route here. I will clone this route and I will put it here. This will be about users. And then here I will say index users. And let me then import that. So import the index users from auth index users. But before we can test, let's go back to index users because here we forgot to add a TD for the email of the user. So let me say here TD and let me say here expression user email. And here we should have put email also. So let me save and let's make our first test. Let me come back to Chrome and let's go to users. And as you can see here, we have Felipe and we have make admin and remove admin. But we should add some color, a different color to remove admin, and also add some space in between these two buttons. So let me do that right away. Let's come back here. And for the coloring, I can say here, class name, button, danger, save. This is better. And let's go back. And for the margin, here in the second button, we're going to say MS2 for a left margin. So here we have some spacing. Now let me work on the functionality of these two buttons. So let's come here. And the thing is that they basically do the same. So what I will do is that I will create a third function that will say do admin. And I will receive a URL, a string, an ID, a string, which is the ID of the user. So I will say await Axios, control dot to import Axios, post URL, JSON stringify the ID, then comma here, and I will pass headers, content type, application JSON, and then semicolon here. Why do we have to do this? We have to do that because here in the web API, let me go to accounts controller. Here in the make admin and remove admin endpoint, we're receiving a string, which means that by default, this is sending content type text, but we want to use application JSON. So that is why I am stringifying it, the string, and also saying application JSON explicitly. So after that, I will just say swal fire, and as always, I need to import swal of sweet alert, and then I will pass an object that will say title success, then text operation finish correctly, and then icon success. Alright, so let me put a semicolon here, and now let me implement this make admin. I will say here await do admin backtick URL accounts slash make admin comma ID. Then I'll do the same here, but here remove admin. Alright, we are good to go. Let me go back to Chrome. Let me refresh, and I want to make a test. I will log out I am not allowed to be in this page. That is normal. I will log in. No, I will actually register. Let me say Felipe2@hotmail.com. I will just use the same password as always. Send. And here we are as Felipe. As you can see, he is not an admin. So nothing much we can do here. Now I will make Felipe2 an admin. So log out, log in. I will use Felipe@hotmail.com. And then I will copy this and paste it here, send. And now I will go to users, and here I have Felipe2. I'll make him an admin, so do it. Success, okay. Now log out, log in, Felipe2@hotmail.com. Let me put my password, send. And as you can see, now Felipe2 is an admin. Now let me log out and make Felipe2 a normal user one more time. So send, users, remove, do it. Now if we go back as Felipe2, you are going to see that we successfully removed him as an admin. So as you can see, he doesn't have access to the admin menu anymore. And with this we have finished our application. Now all that is left to do is to deploy them to production, both the web API and the React application. See you in the last module of this course. Authentication allows the user to tell us who they are. In our application, we use username and password so that the user can authenticate. Authorization tells us what a user can and cannot do. Thus, we can protect parts of our application from unauthorized users. Claims are information about the user that we can trust. In our app, we generate our own claims and we place them in the JSON Web Tokens. With identity, we create a user system in ASP.NET Core in a simple way, where we only have to use the identity libraries to have the functionalities of a user system. We use interceptors to send the JSON Web Token through Axios with a centralized configuration. We use claim-based authorization to indicate that only administrators could perform certain actions at the level of our web API.